The first time I did acid, I was in Kathmandu last summer and ended up wandering around the streets of Kathmandu all night with a small group of friends. And oh my gosh, there was some point that was, we ended up going up and finding our way to the Monkey Temple, which is on the top of this hill there. I'm not sure if you've been to Kathmandu. Yeah, so we went up at night, and so there's no one there. There's just feral dogs and crazy monkeys. And it was like pretty sketchy, so I was like carrying a stick and some rocks just in case, but everyone was afraid to go up, but I went up first, and then basically got to explore this gorgeous temple there's a picture on my Instagram of me up in there, and there's like barking dogs all over the place, monkeys shaking the trees, and it's like, this is so real and intense, and I'm in Kathmandu, and like everything was just, I've never taken a lot of acid. I took a very small amount, but just enough that everything is just weird. Everything is a little weird. That's
So I wonder how the monkeys. I've always felt that animals can tell when I'm tripping.
I really agree. The first time I took mushrooms, my dad took me to a circus.
Oh, that doesn't sound good. Actually.
It was actually amazing.
Really?
Yeah. As we
sounds so sad.
As I was walking around the big top, there was a tiger in a cage, and I had a kitten at the time. I got really good at making eye contact in a certain way that would make him attack me. Put his ears down and like start to talk. I could just look at him in a certain way. And I'm looking at this tiger who's sleeping casually, lazy, and we make eye contact, and I was just starting to feel it come on, and I didn't know that I had taken mushrooms, but I didn't really know what was going to happen.
Right.
And all of a sudden this tiger looks at me, and we make eye contact, and it puts its ears down and then lunges at the cage and roars and sticks its arm through. And I'm like, what just happened? But totally it had to have known,
it felt the energy.
Yeah. I don't know what that is, but it certainly felt like there was something there.
Well, the animals are that's their language. They're dealing with energies all the time. I've had all these crazy experiences with otters when I was tripping. Once in Alaska, and once actually I was camping out beside that river in northern Mexico that I was talking about in Bato Pilas. Yeah, and otters are just like, hey, who are you? And
wow.
they're all just hanging out and completely fearless, and because they're such smart, curious little things.
Are.
I love otters.
Yeah. I have a really interesting experience with otters. So they're in the weasel family, which is like a very ferocious animal. Wolverines, for example, and honey badgers and all that. Yeah, exactly.
Honey badger don't care.
Wolverines, they'll take on a group of wolves to steal an elk kill. I've seen National Geographic back in the day when Marty Stauffer did that. You see this Wolverine come up to a pack of wolves that had taken down an elk, and just very casually comes up and starts eating, and the wolves start snarling at it and snapping at it, and all of a sudden it just switches from this like casual little dorky looking weasel bear to this Wolverine, like the X-Men hero, just like a fearless motherfucker with huge claws that just starts snarling and spitting, and the wolves are eventually like, fuck this, I don't want to deal with this psychopath, and takes the kill. But anyway, so a friend of mine, his dog was attacked by otters while he was swimming in the lake. He had chased the otters out into the lake, and then they swam off, and then all of a sudden disappear under, and the dog went under. They pulled it under like jaws, and then all of a sudden the dog comes up and is yelping and comes out and is all cut up. So I was in Western Washington. This is right before an Inipi ceremony, a sweat lodge ceremony with Gilbert Walking Bull, and there was snow on the ground. And I went down to this lake that I used to sit by for an hour every day in silence. And the lake was called Lindorn, which in Gaelic means otter pond. And there were some otters there, and I always had seen tracks and trails, but they were rarely in the pond. And it was a mother, and I had seen them when the babies were pups, but now they were kind of mid-size. And I stalk down through the snow, take off all my clothes, and then find one spot where there's not too much ice, and sneak into the water because they're all up taking a nap in the sun on a log. So I'm trying to sneak up. I want to touch them. That was always my thing. I wanted to sneak up and touch wild animals. That was how I would test my kind of
counting
nature. Yeah, exactly. And I'm getting close, and then I'm about 8 feet away, and all of a sudden, I'm shivering in the water. It was ice, and making some ripples on. I guess the mother senses me, and all of a sudden, wakes up and pokes her head up and starts looking at me and is just moving around like a cobra, like moving around like this and that, like trying to triangulate me and figure out what's going on. All of a sudden wakes up the other two and they're all looking around and looking at me, and I'm just like remembering this story about killing the dog, and I'm thinking of Wolverines, and I'm like, oh, what am I doing right now? Like, maybe this is a bad idea. And then they go underwater, they dive into the water, and all of a sudden, because their fur traps air bubbles, and that's how they stay buoyant and stay warm. And so I see these trail of air bubbles coming towards me, and it's like a shark fin. And there's three traveling in like a triangle, like a jet fighter's coming right at me, and I'm just like, no, holding perfectly still, and two pass to one side and the other one passes on the other side, and I feel the water displacement on my leg. It just almost touches me. And as soon as they pass me, I just like bolted, I was in deep mud, like struggling, getting out of the water. I'm coming out of mud. I'm like, and all of a sudden I hear from across the lake, I hear this really deep laugh, like, oh, 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 oh. Gilbert Walking Bull, the Lakota shaman, was down. He had gone for a walk and he had seen the whole thing. And then he's like, there's an Inipi fire on the top of the hill. And so I go up and I'm sitting next to the fire to warm up, and he comes up and he's still laughing, and he comes and tells the story, and he tells everyone that's there, and he tells a story about when they used to catch badgers on the reservation, and they caught this one badger, or they had hid it in the car or something like that, and it was stunned. They put it in the back seat, and somehow it woke up, and they're driving this like shitty little pickup truck down the res, and this badger wakes up and starts like tearing the seats apart and all this, and they had to stop and get out, and the badger jumps out and runs away. Yeah, no, weasels and cats are the only like real full carnivores in the mammals. You know, like wolves and bears, they're omnivores. They're not. There's something about the weasels and the cats that are, you know, they're real hardcore full predators.
Yeah.
But otters are just adorable as well.
Yeah, they are. They're curious.
Yeah, they seem really smart.
Yeah, yeah. What I was with these two friends of mine. We were camping along this wild river near Kenai in Alaska, and we'd taken some acid, and I remember. We were because I always had this acid and sewn into my back.
It's in every story.
Well, it was for special occasions.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, some people have champagne. But I remember we were so high, and we had this beautiful fire, and somebody threw a lighter in the fire, and it made this nice explosion. And then, and then we realized we don't have any lighters left. And, what are we doing? Like, it's just dumb shit. Anyway, but we're next to this rushing, glacial Alaskan river, and I heard this like barking, and I look out, and there are all these otters, but the river was going so fast, and they were just like still. Right in the middle of the current, looking at us, periscoping, and then they'd go under, and then they'd pop up, but like they must have been just underwater, just paddling so hard to just stay stable, and it just felt like, when you said there was laughter, I thought the otters were laughing because it seemed like those otters were
very
laughing
playful.
At us. Yeah,
you get to like they look like they're having such a great time, just sliding over stuff and just wriggling around. Yeah, the sea otters laying on their backs, cracking oysters on their bellies.
Yeah, fantastic.